Hi, I'm Chef Scott Samuel here at the Culinary Institute of America in Napa Valley. Today I'm going to be working with Maine Lobster. I'm going to show you a couple different methods for cooking. The method right now is the pour-over method. I have some boiling water, and I'm going to be working with soft shell and hard shell lobsters. I have the hard shell here and the soft shell here. I will talk about the difference in the two after I cook them, but first I want to talk about how we're going to do this. So boiling water, lobsters that have been put into a container that will fit the boiling water, and I have some white wine vinegar. So for every 8 quarts of water, I have a half a cup of vinegar, and this is going to help coagulate the protein of the lobster so that I can actually remove the shell and keep the lobster partially cooked. So the first part of this process will be cooking the lobster for about 4 to 5 minutes, and then I'm going to take them out and I'm going to remove the tail. The tail only needs that amount of time to partially cook. Then I'll add the claws and the knuckles right back to the water and cook them for another 4 to 5 minutes. Well, in a sense, poaching them. There's no direct heat. So boiling water. All right, we'll start the timer for 4 minutes. Cover that. All right, so this is the pour-over method, and it's steeping in hot water, 4 to 5 minutes, depending on the size of the lobster. These are 1.5 pound Maine lobsters, and we'll come back to these in just a couple minutes. Okay, so it's been about 4 minutes. We've done the steep method, also known as the pour-over method. And part of the lobster is cooked. The tail is partially cooked. We'll move these lobsters out. And I want to put the claws back in for another 3 to 4 minutes, depending on size. And as these are 1.5 pound Maine lobsters, we'll go for another 3.5 minutes. So these are the soft shells that are coming out compared to the hard shells. We'll discuss the difference in a minute. All right, so what I want to do is take the arm off, knuckle and claw. We'll put these back in to continue steeping. So this is a method that was taught to me by Chef Thomas Keller at the French Laundry in 1998 while I spent a summer there. And I've kind of taken this method with me throughout the years in using lobster in applications where I want to cook it again. So I'm partially cooking it 60 to 70% of the way so that I can remove it from the shell, ice it down, and then if I want to make a lobster risotto or something poached lobster with steak, I can go ahead and cook it in beurre monté, melted butter mixture, and serve it perfectly cooked. All right, so I've added the claws to the hot water. We're going to steep it for another 3.5 minutes, and then we'll come back and break out the meat from the shells. All right, removing the tails. So as you can see, I'm working while they're hot because I want to remove the shells while the lobster is still warm. Okay, another female here. We're taking a look at that roe. We'll remove that in a minute. And here are the soft shells, and you can definitely see that these have very soft bodies, and the legs are a lot softer than our hard shell counterpart. Another female there. So let's just take a look at the difference between the hard shell and the soft shell. Hard shell, I cannot bend the body. Soft shell, I can definitely pinch this. And the difference between the legs, these are quite hard, and these are brand new. So it's lost its previous shell, and it's growing into a new shell. So it's still at a point where the lobster meat is young and sweeter. All right, so we've had another 3.5 minutes for our claws to have a chance to cook. Our soft shell, we're 1.1 pound lobsters. So they're a little bit smaller than our 1.5 pound selects. All right, so now that our lobster is cooked, and we're gonna start to break it down right now with some scissors. But I wanna talk a little bit more about the roe. So we have the roe that's in the tail right here, and you can see the little tiny eggs. When we clean this, we're gonna remove the roe and we're gonna make a compound butter out of the roe. And if you look at the body right here, we have some of the roe left over here, but we also have this sack of tamale. We're not gonna be using that, we're just gonna focus on using the roe that we're gonna be removing in order to make a roe butter. And one more thing about the roe is I'm gonna be making a roe butter, and it will be a green butter. And as soon as I cook it, if I finish it in a sauce or if I finish it with some cream, or I'll be adding this roe butter to my risotto, it will turn a bright orange. And in some cases, when you boil a lobster, this roe will not be dark green anymore. It will cook and it will be dark red. Okay, so let's break down these lobsters. On this side, we have the hard shell, and this side we have the soft shell. So as I noted during the cooking process, the soft shell has a softer shell. It also has a sweeter meat, and it has a little bit more liquid within the shell. So in this method where we did the pour over method, we're not going to make use of the liquid, but in other methods where you were to kill a live lobster with a knife, you would be able to actually save that liquid and incorporate it into a sauce or a bisque. But the benefit of having a soft shell for me is that it's going to be a lot easier to open and clean. So let's start cutting one of these open and see how it works. So the shell itself, you can see the difference between the two. Cutting with these shears, it's quite simple, and you can see the meat itself I think is going to be a lot lighter. And that's on an ice tray right there. And then let's do the difference between the hard shell, which, as I noted, these are a little bit of a larger lobster. But to open them up takes a little bit more effort to get through the shell. But it's the same method. And as you can see, the difference in the meat is contrast to color, and this one will be, the soft shell will be a little sweeter. Prepping the claws, what I like to do is snap off the knuckle, and then with the shears, and I'm kind of keeping my angle of my scissor up so that I don't cut into the meat too much. And see how simple that is? Just a 1-2, open the claw, pull out the knuckle, put that on ice, and then for the claw itself, kind of shaking out, pull out the cartilage if I can. There's a little bit of meat in there, I'll get that meat out. But we want to pull this cartilage out of the claw so that we're not using that in service. And then once again with the shears, you see how easy it is to cut through a soft shell. All right, so that is the lobster tail, the lobster claw, and the lobster knuckle. So let's move into working with the hard shell. So this is going to be just a little bit more difficult than the soft shell, but nothing too hard with a sharp pair of kitchen shears. So we'll do one side, and then as you can see, I'm kind of cutting upwards with this so that I do not poke the meat. Just all the way down to the tail, where I can open this and peel out the tail. And then working with the hard shell claw, we'll take the knuckle off. We're going to cut through one side. This is a little bit more difficult than the soft shell, so I want to take some care not to cut myself. And the same kind of concept, we're going to peel it open and remove the shell. All right, so we remove that, take the cartilage out. We got some of that meat from the claw here. So here we have a nice claw, we have our tail meat and our knuckle meat. So we'll put these side by side, take a look at the difference in color. And both of these lobsters are partially cooked, about 60 to 70% done. I'm going to kind of finish breaking these down and keep it on ice until I use it in other applications. All right, so I'd like to move forward and continue breaking down these lobsters. We've taken the meat out of the shells, so we have left over the tail shell and some claw shell. I will incorporate these into the stock. I want to move forward with the bodies and remove the roe to set aside for a roe butter. And then I want to clean them up so I can use this to make a stock. So that'll be a separate video in this series on how to make a lobster stock. So let's take a look at what we're doing here. So let's start with this beautiful hard shell lobster, which has a lot of roe in it. And what I want to do is remove the roe. And that's the dark green sac right here. I don't want to get any of the light green. That's the tamale, so I'm just removing the roe. All right, I got some nice roe from this one also. All right, and in breaking down the lobster, I want to go ahead and take the legs off. The legs have some meat. Some chefs will go as far as rolling with a rolling pin the legs in order to get out the minute amount of meat. I like to incorporate these into my stock. So I'm building a kind of a pan right here for everything that's going to go into my stock. We have a lobster head right here. And I just want to cut these up into about 1-inch pieces. All right, so then if I take this lobster apart, I want to show you these right here. These are the gills. Out of everything that I'm going to do in breaking down the lobster, the gills are what I'm going to remove and not use. So the gills and the intestines and the tamale are the items I'm not going to use. So I'm going to remove this apart. I'll clean this a little bit, rinse it in cold water, and continue to chop up the body until I have all the components that I need for my stock. So this is the body that I talked about, removing the gills. Take a little bit more of the gills off. I've rinsed these off for making it clean, make sure all the gills are off. The gills are important to remove because they would incorporate a metallic flavor into your bisque or your stock and change the color from a bright red to kind of a dull gray. So removing the gills is most important. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut this body up so that I can use it with my stock. So these are the components that I'm left with breaking down a lobster. I have the lobster meat that's par cooked that I'm going to keep iced down until I'm ready to clean and use for the application. I have the lobster shells and the body and the head and the tail and the claw, all the shell from the body except for our gills, the tamale and the other insides of the lobster. And then we have the roe that we're going to go ahead and use for a lobster butter. So we have a few more videos within this series where I'll use all of these. The next one I'm going to be working on will be the lobster stock.